and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A couple things. We're just going to change up the agenda a little bit. Our first item is public participation. So we are going to have a second public participation period just before, during the field portion. So if you have comments specific to the field studies, we're going to address, we'll allow public participation for any other item. We'll go through the bulk of the agenda. When we come to the item on the field, which I think is number 8, we'll allow the field committee, or number 7, I think? 7. We'll allow the committee to present and then go into public comment, because it's very possible that those of you who have comments or questions, they may be answered and maybe not necessary for you to speak. You're still welcome to. So I hope everybody's fine with that piece. So Glenn, would you?
Yes, the next item, as the chair said, is the public participation for non-field study items. If you have any other items to address to the board. Hearing and seeing none, we move on to item number 3 is the consent agenda. There's items A through G4, and at this time, if anyone wants to pull an item for individual discussion, now would be the time to do so. Hearing none, a motion is in order.
Move the consent agenda, make a recommendation of this action to a joint meeting of the City Council and Board of Finance. Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Items number 4 are subcommittee reports. Item A is the Insurance Committee of March 2nd, 2016. John is chair.
I think, does everyone have a copy of that?
Mhm.
Does everyone have a copy?
Yes.
Okay. We spent a significant amount of time talking about the benefit package and our costs going forward, which appear to be in line with what we projected, about 0.5% higher, I think, than what we projected.
That's correct, John.
But I think we're also beginning to see some of the benefit of our wellness program in regard to cost utilization. And other than that, I think the meeting was that part of the meeting was fine. Our workers' comp, and we did make a comment on that Walter's budget presentation, and again I will repeat that we've made some significant headway in workers' compensation, and that is a result of our department heads and supervisors doing an outstanding job in making changes in the way they operate their particular departments. And so our numbers relative to accidents have been reduced dramatically. We're always going to have them. I mean, with the number of things that are going on in this city relative to employees and the kind of work that they're dealing with, we're going to have accidents. But we've really ratcheted down the number of unnecessary accidents that have occurred over the past 3 or 4 years, and that allows us to take money that we used to spend on that particular policy and spend it on other kinds of things that we ought to be doing, as opposed to lining the pockets up. That's the wrong word. Paying exorbitant amounts to insurance companies because we were not paying attention to the kind of safety programs we should have. We're now doing that. So again, thank you to the department heads that are here, and I know the mayor and Diane have sent out a couple of thank you letters to the department heads saying exactly that. So, but it's never often that we should repeat that often, just so that people know that we're thankful that they're on board with us in that regard. My report.
Motion to accept.
Does somebody have a motion?
Yes, we do.
Have a motion?
Yes, I do. Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to accept the Insurance Committee report. Insurance Committee report as presented March 2, 2016, and place it on file.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
The second item in the subcommittee reports, item number 4B, is Donations Committee of March 14.
Yeah, the donations committee, particularly regarding a request from the Bristol preschool for a donation to their new project, which is taking place at the Jennings School. They do have a grant, but they have to raise somewhere around $700,000 to $750,000. They have made a request of the city for a donation not to exceed $50,000, I think is the number.
That's right.
And we listened to their request, made no decisions at this point, nor a recommendation is that we would build it, we would consider that as part of the budget process.
Do we have a motion?
We have a motion, Madam Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to accept the donation committee report from March 14, 2016, and place it on file.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Glenn, before you go on, I need to excuse myself from item number 5.
Understood.
I'm still under a waiver with Covanta, so I'm going to turn the meeting over to the vice chair, and I will step outside.
Sure. I will wait to do the reading until she does step outside. Item number 5, Acting Chairman, is a request from Public Works for approval of resolution regarding approval of Second Amendment to the Municipal Solid Waste Disposal and Recycling Services Agreement between the City of Bristol and Covanta Bristol, Inc.
I have a motion to adopt the resolution regarding the amendment to the settlement agreement with Covanta and to waive the reading of the resolution, but be included as part of the minutes.
We have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? We need a roll call vote on this?
Probably a good idea.
Roll call beginning on my right. Mike?
Yes.
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 Chair votes yes.
Resolution is approved.
Someone get the chairman?
Can you just get out there? Thank you very much.
Ladies' room.
Well, we can continue. Jack, continue.
Yeah, you can keep going, you can continue if you want. Item number 6, here she comes.
You guys are too fast.
You've been removed as chairman. Just kidding. Item number 6, Madam Chairman, is the request from the purchasing department for approval of revisions to the purchasing manual.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the revisions to the purchasing manual regarding the disposition of real estate.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Roger, would you like to come up and address the board, please?
Yes, thank you. Actually, the revisions that I've given to you, I had also subsequently presenting to you. I presented them to the Real Estate Committee, and the Real Estate Committee does have some revisions to them that they'd like to propose and discuss at their next Real Estate Committee. If I can ask that we table this for this evening until I get further clarification from the Real Estate Committee. Ultimately, this is something that would then be incorporated into the Code of Ordinances as it currently exists.
Motion to table.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion?
One comment.
Yes.
Roger, when you look at the wording on this, it's grammatical. You've got a sentence where you've got one parentheses, and it's not enclosed, so you might want to take a look at that.
Okay.
Is that in item number 3?
Item number 3?
Yes.
Okay, I'll take a look at that. In essence, what it is that I'm trying to accomplish is make sure that long-term, recently you were presented with discussing the potential sale of property within the 17-acre site across the street. And ultimately, I don't think that's significantly different than other parcels that are under the governance of development authorities, such as the industrial park. And we're just trying to make a procedural correction to that going forward. I do want to make sure that I have the Real Estate Committee's blessing before I fully get yours.
Very good. Any further discussion? Oh, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I request that we move to item 8 and leave item 7 last and get rid of some of the normal business that takes place. Is that okay with you?
Please proceed in that manner. Thank you.
Okay. Item number 8 is the Controller's Office request to transfer $109,428 to the general fund contingency account.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to transfer $109,428 to the general fund contingency account from the miscellaneous account, to recommend approval of this action to the joint meeting of the City Council and Board of Finance.
Second.
Motion made, I keep putting this off. Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? As you can see, this is the recovery of the IRS funds. Again, thanks to Robin and the rest of the Controller's Office for their hard work
Mainly
in
Robin.
recovering this.
Thank you.
And the mayor for putting us in touch with our representatives, and he discussed it when he went on the mayor's conference. I understand the letters are going, did they go out today?
Today, yes.
The letters of thank you went out to various officials that assisted us with this, so obviously it's a close of a traumatic time for us.
Mhm.
Madam Chairman, do you want to go to number 7, or do you want to go to new business? Oh,
All in
sorry.
favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Bingo. Do you want to go to the number 7, or do you want to go to 9 and 10 too?
Let's just do quickly 9 and 10.
Sure. Is there any new business to come before the board? Item 9. Hearing and seeing none. Item 10 is any old business that want to be discussed by the board. Hearing and seeing none. Item number 7 is appropriate at this time. The Mayor's Synthetic Field Operations Committee, consideration of a bonding appropriation of $2,940,000.
Good evening. Last month, we sent out a package outlining what the Synthetic Field Committee outlined for our project that we're seeking. These fields that we're attempting to seek has been ongoing for at least over 1.5 to 2 years. We've been in several committees. Last year we had discussion on that, and then moving forward we hired a professional service to investigate some analyst analysis for the necessary of the synthetic fields. Tonight we have with us David Dixon and Kevin Fusilier from Along with Broom to go over what their findings are. After their discussion, we would definitely answer any questions you have. It's pretty thorough. All the board members of our committee are here, and I think at this time we'll have Kevin and Dave go through their work, and then we'll entertain your questions.
Yeah, we do have a mic. Take a moment.
Test. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. My name is David Dixon. I'm a professional landscape architect with the firm of Malone McBroom in Cheshire, Connecticut. With me tonight is Kevin Fusilier, also a landscape architect, lead landscape architect and associate with the firm. What we'll do initially is we're going to go through both of the existing fields. Many of you on this committee and others have probably heard some of this background before, but I think it's important that we go through it once more. So we're going to start with Bristol Central. The school sits over here. North is in this direction, so that the orientation of the field is in a perfect north-south orientation, which is most advantageous for solar gain, which is a good thing. Your existing track is an 8-lane track and was recently resurfaced. I believe it was completed last fall, September, October. When they did that, they did a very smart thing. The city was smart enough to recognize that in the future this may become a turf field, and as such they introduced a track edge drain, which is an important component of any synthetic turf field. Previous to that, there were a series of depressions in the grassed area. Those are areas that are potential trip hazards, and they therefore are not playable. So now you get the full use of the existing width of this field, of this track. Note this track is what's called an equal quadrant track. As such, that both tangent lengths and the length of each of the curves is equal. This was a very common design 15, 20 years ago. Nowadays, with NCAA standards and some of the Olympic standards, they're pushing for what's referred to as a fat track. And we'll see the difference when we look at Bristol Eastern. Eastern has what's called a fat track. It gives you much more room in terms of width. And width really comes into play primarily with soccer. This meets the requirements for soccer, for NFHS soccer, as well as football and all the other sports that are anticipated being played here. So your field events are over here. You've got a shot put event, you've got your pole vault event, and you've got twin long and triple jumps. You have a small area over in here where there's a small portable bleacher, and your high jump is located in this location. Part of our work as part of the feasibility study was to take a look also at the soils. So we did some soils investigation. We had some test pits were performed. We sent the tests out, the topsoil material and subsurface material out for testing for pesticides. There were none detected. That's always a good thing when we're talking about fields that our kids are going to be using. We also had some deep borings performed. So we had Clarence Welty and Associates came out, and in locations where we would anticipate putting lighting, field lighting at this field, here, 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 and here, they went down 20 feet to make sure that we could get the light poles in as we intended them would be if this goes forward. There was only one location, boring number 3 over here, where they hit refusal at 11 feet, but that's just about the depth that we need to be at anyhow for the poles. So we'll move on to Eastern. You can see the difference between the interior width of the track in here. So this is also an 8-lane track. Now this was done about 5 or 6 years ago. The interesting aspect of, and the advantageous part of this is that if you approve moving forward with the synthetic turf fields, there's a couple of things that would happen. First of all, we would introduce a new track edge drain. Right now, similar to what Bristol or Central used to have, you have a series of depressions in the grass, which don't permit you to play the full playable width of the field and do represent a bit of a safety hazard. You also have a field, a track, that is reaching the point at which it needs a new synthetic top coat, which is a synthetic spray coat that goes on, and then restriping of the fields. If you don't do that about every 7 years out of a 20 or 21 year lifespan for expected lifespan for a track, then the EPDM or the synthetic or rubberized surface loses its resiliency and begins to fade and crack. So that's important. So the cost that we have prepared in our cost estimate does include a new structural spray coat for the track. So the new, the existing jumping events occur down in this D zone. When we talk about D zones, this looks like a D, a reverse D, and these are our D zones in here. Typically, these are locations for jumping events. But in the case of Eastern, your jumping events are located remotely, which is perfectly fine and actually is a bit advantageous. So you don't have a lot of clustered things in the end zones that compete with each other. You also have a long triple jump located over in here, and twin-headed pole vault runways over here. You've got your existing tennis courts, we're in good shape, and there's a ADA accessible ramp that gets you up to the existing tennis courts, but there is no ADA accessible means from this side, from the school side, to get to the track. And we address that in the proposed concept plan. You have existing bleachers, which accommodate approximately 900. So the majority of people enter at this end and come in, funnel in, get their tickets, and take their seats. You just did some wonderful upgrades over here at your concession area and your press box in this location. At this point, I'm going to turn this over to Kevin, and Kevin's going to walk us through the proposed improvements at each of the schools.
Thank you, Dave. Again, for the record, my name is Kevin Fusilier, landscape architect with Mylone McBroom. We're starting at Central, and you can see our concept plan, which is converting the natural grass field to synthetic turf. As David mentioned, some improvements have already occurred to the track and some of the jumping areas, so we'll take advantage of those improvements. Was it better if I'm on the other side? I can do this. Okay. So we're going to take advantage of some of those improvements that were done last year when the project was completed, and that's primarily the installation of the track edge drain, but also the new track surfacing. We are showing under our concept plans expanded seating, and in order to achieve that at Bristol Central, we need to relocate the long jump event areas, which are currently shown under this grandstand system. So as Dave mentioned, in an equal quadrant track, we have enough room in the D zone to locate 2 runways for a long jump. It's a common location. That would free up the space for future grandstand expansion. The field itself, synthetic turf, it's the green area shown. So this is the existing high jump, this is the new paved D zone. For both fields, we're proposing a 2-inch pile height, grass height blade, 1.5 inches of infill over a shock pad. The shock pad is an element that we've been incorporating into our lot of designs. It guarantees the safety, the impact safety of that field over actually multiple lifespans of synthetic turf. So this is an element when it comes to head injuries and concussions that we are pretty adamant about moving forward in any designs that we do. And we think it makes just a lot of sense because infill and fields can be under-maintained, can get harder over time, but that shock pad's really going to be there. It's going to be an insurance policy that that field doesn't ever get hard enough that it'll guarantee concussion when a player hits their head on it. David mentioned we did borings at Central. That would be for a new 4-pole lighting system comparable to what's at Eastern. It's shown in yellow at the locations around the field at the 15-yard line of football. That lighting system would be able to do 50-foot candles of lighting, which is adequate for high school level competitive sports. That addresses the improvements here at Bristol Central. There are some other common elements that we're going to stripe them all permanently for the same sports: soccer, football, boys and girls lacrosse, and we're showing traditional varsity letters at both locations. Just to give some idea of the size difference when you have 2 different configurations of track, at Central, we're looking at about 87,000 square feet of turf, and at Bristol Eastern, because of the width of the track, we're up almost to 110,000 square feet. So it's a significantly wider field. It's going to allow for the widest, one of the widest possible soccer configurations. However, as David mentioned, at Bristol Central, we're still conforming with National Federation high school standards for all sports being played. So Bristol Eastern, we do have to do improvements to the track. We have to add a track edge drain to collect the runoff from the running surface, but also to provide an anchor for the turf carpet. So that would be cut along the inside edge of the existing running track. Then the edge drain would be spliced in. A new patch of track would go around to seal that up. And then the entire track would receive that structural spray coat that David mentioned is required at Bristol Eastern due to the time that surface has been in use. Here we have lighting, here we have grandstands. We do show some improvements to them to expand if we want to try to match the quantity of both facilities. But right now, that's in addition to the base project. New D-zone paved for high jump this time, where it was long jump at Bristol Central. This D-zone would be paved, it would be used for high jump. And while the other one, since we don't have to relocate the jumping events, we would keep that synthetic turf. We find that when you have a synthetic turf D-zone, that area is used a lot by athletes for stretching and warming up. So those are the two concepts we've come up with. We try to keep them balanced and even, try to bring both facilities up to the same level. And Dave, do you want to? Okay. So I can answer questions about design. I believe we've provided the budgets.
Why don't we just go right into what everybody's interested in is the crumb rubber. That's the big thing that everybody's concerned about. We hear a lot about it in the news. I know I've sat in all your meetings, I think all of them, maybe missed one. And I know you have the research, so tell us a little bit about your research with the crumb rubber.
Well, we've gathered extensive research on crumb rubber. We've performed some testing in-house, but we do not rely on that testing when we're addressing the public concern, because that was, we did that ourselves. So we've gathered 29 reports and studies done independently, and most of them have been peer-reviewed, and those 29 reports all come up to the same conclusion, that there's no perceived elevated health risk. So whenever we're working with a client base, we educate them on our findings, the reports that are out there. We share the negative commentary that's out there with them as well. And we educate you, but we rely on you. You need to make the choice. We can also talk about artificial, alternate infill to crumb rubber. But again, even the state just this last month in February came back reiterating their statement that they don't see any elevated health risk with crumb rubber.
Would you take a minute to talk about the alternatives? Did
Sure.
you bring your samples?
I did, and I can pull some out. If you would like, I can pass around alternate
Take a
infill.
couple minutes to talk about the
Sure.
alternative fills.
Sure. So the standard infill is crumb rubber, recycled SBR tires, which that's ground up car tires, and that's mixed with sand in a normal system. I did mention the shock pad, and I'll pass this around. If you want, I can pass the bag of crumb rubber around if you'd like to see it. But there are alternates out there. The first thing we always let everyone know with alternates, there's a 20 to 30% upcharge in the cost of the product. So when you're talking about an expensive field like synthetic turf, it does make the price go up considerably. So it's recycled tire. Yes, we can talk about that. So here's one of the more expensive infield options. This is TPE. This is a thermoplastic. We have used this product in a couple fields. This is EPDM, the bright green. EPDM is a synthetic rubber. It's not recycled, so it comes out of laboratory, but it is still a rubber product. And then here, this is coconut husk. Organics have become more used. Again, when I say alternate infill, there's thousands and thousands of crumb rubber fields around the country and around the world. There's only a small portion of that is alternative infill. And then is the coated sand in there? Coated sand. It's a rounded silica sand with a green acrylic coating. That would go in 100% into the field. It wouldn't be mixed with anything. So with all these alternate infills, you rely on that shock pad for the cushioning. You cannot get the same cushioning out of these that you can in crumb rubber, or at least not in any volume that's realistic.
Even the manufactured rubber has less of a...
Manufactured rubber, I'm sorry, EPDM, you are correct. You could use that because it is still rubber. It has the rubber properties. It's much more expensive, obviously, I keep saying that, than crumb rubber, but it could be used in lieu of crumb rubber mixed with sand. I guess this is another one that people hear about. This is Nike Grind. Don't even know if we could get enough to do a field, but there are fields out there. Ground up Nike tires, again, rubber with coloring in it and other elements, but what did I say? Nike shoes. Not Nike shoes, I don't know if Nike tires, sorry. They'll probably start making them. So there are options out there. There are a lot of options. There's a big added cost with them. There are different maintenance requirements for them. The coconut has to have moisture in it. That moisture can lead to freezing early in the season, or early in the winter, or early in the spring, late in the winter. We have done the EnviroFill, a sand field. So we're starting to see a couple of these fields pop up here and there. I don't know the number of alternate infills in Connecticut, but probably could count them on my two hands. It's not to say there won't be more, but there's plenty of projects moving forward this year using chrome rubber. They're listening to the studies. And at Hampton High, last year we did a synthetic turf replacement field with them. There was no opposition this year. There was quite a bit of opposition when we're going through the regulatory process. We stuck with it. We worked with the town. They wanted us to defend chrome rubber and justify the findings, which we did, and it was approved. The only thing, they asked us for a couple conditions in their approval in planning and zoning, and that was to source only American car tires in the recycled tires. We didn't know if that was possible. We called Liberty Tire, one of the biggest manufacturers, and they indeed will certify, they'll manufacture and certify non-truck, commercial-grade truck tires from American-sourced tires. So that's a condition that we'll have to ask for when we go out to bid on that project, which we're in the process of doing now.
The reasoning?
It was a condition they came up with, and we decided, if we found out we could adhere to it, we didn't oppose it.
What the reason would be?
No, that's the reason I can give you.
Could you take a couple minutes and talk about the life of the carpet?
Sure.
And the fill, and
Yep.
how frequently, what kind of maintenance has to occur?
Yep.
And I'm going to ask you to talk about weather conditions, both, I heard you can plow it, and also the 90-degree days, if you could kind of
Okay.
go in that.
All right, if I skip anything, just remind me. Any synthetic turf carpet, almost any, is warranted for 8 years from the manufacturer. That's for the fiber, that's for the backing, that's for the condition of the field. And so that means if your field, if something has an issue, the manufacturer comes back within those 8 years and fixes it. We've seen a fix go from fix a line that has come up to replace an entire field because the fiber started pulling out prematurely. What we have seen though is over the years, and I've been designing these fields for about 10 years, the quality is better and better and better, and that we're seeing fields that are 10, 12 years old being replaced that probably still have another couple years left with them. Now, the fibers start looking worn down, the infill migrates a little bit away from the field, there needs to be some top dressing, so that brings us to maintenance. Maintenance, these fields, you groom them. You basically have a nylon brush on the back of a tractor, and every couple weeks, every so many hours of use, you, just like you're mowing the lawn, you drag that brush back and forth over the field. You're just redistributing the infill, remixing it, and cleaning it up. You can also sweep your field at that time, get out leaves. Some people run a magnet over it. You'll find a lot of hairpins in the field, and you'll find miscellaneous objects that just make their way on. So there is some maintenance. They're not maintenance free. But with proper maintenance and then proper monitoring, we can guarantee a safe field over 8 years. With enough rubber in it, chrome rubber, you test it for head injury every year. You do a GMAX test. We're actually introducing new additional testing, just the industry as a whole is. But when I say you can keep it safe, we're talking GMAX, 200 used to be the industry standard. 200, if you fell from standing height and hit your head, you have a concussion, and probably a pretty bad one. We, on our spec, lowered that to 165 because we don't want that manufacturer to ever allow that field to get higher. So once a year they come back, they test the field. If it's out of compliance, they work with you to bring that field back into compliance, whether it's adding a little more rubber, whether it's decompacting by grooming. Now, with us using that item I showed you, the shock pad, the GMAX of that field will never go over, on this particular model, I want to say about 120.
Oh, he's got
I
another,
got it.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, again, I think I passed that around. So using a shock pad, it gives you that extra insurance that you're never going to get a hard enough field to cause that immediate head trauma. The other great thing is, well, I said the field's warranted for 8 years, that's warranted for 25. So even though you're paying a little more up front, when you have to go replace that carpet, you pull the carpet off, that pad's still there, you may have to replace a panel or two, but a new carpet goes back down, actually saving some costs, because if it was a traditional stone base, you would have to go in there and do some work to that stone base to get it ready for the next turf. With a pad, you can just, it's not as simple as rolling that off and rolling it back on, but it makes it a lot easier, a lot more cost effective.
What's under the pad?
That's a stone base, that's more like a road base.
How deep?
It depends on the soils here, and looking at them, I forget exactly, we haven't gotten to that level of design yet, but we've done as little as 4 inches, as much as 10. But it's a road base, we're not relying on drainage. This board also serves as a conveyance for stormwater once it travels through the surface. And the water then goes through the board and travels to an outside collector pipe. Under a traditional system, we have a big reservoir of really special graded stone that allows the water to go through. More under drains underneath that conveys it to the outside and then collects it and gets it out.
So the stone sits on what, a pad, not a pad,
It can be on prepared subgrade, but it doesn't even have to be. You do need one on top of that pad just to keep the warranty intact.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily need an additional one underneath. Every site's a little unique, so we look at that design. So you could put a geotech style pad,
Right.
or stone, pad, and then.
Now, would the geotech, if we incorporated that into either of the designs, I mean, that should give us a little more life as well, no?
Yeah, again, depending on, and here we've, as a group, decided to go with the pad, so it's going to be incorporated.
Right.
And it's going to be in between that stone layer and the pad, so it's protecting the pad, it's protecting the stone, anything that might travel through the carpet, which really isn't going to be anything in the carpet through the pad. It wouldn't go contaminate that stone, but again, that stone's dense grade, so we're not relying on it for porosity.
But we'd still have the geotech below the pad too?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right.
Now, you had asked health,
Heat, because of, when we talked, we wanted to know availability of playing time, and
Yeah.
you had brought up the 90-degree day.
Yeah, so heat, here's what I always say, it's usually if it's too hot to play on synthetic turf, it's probably too hot to be playing a full schedule on natural grass. These fields are hotter, there's no question about it, but there are days when it's just going to be too hot. And I know Connecticut has some rules in place that doesn't say if it's 90 degrees you're not playing. It says if it's 90, you can play X number of hours. You have to acclimate yourself to the heat. Some states just have that trigger that when there's a certain temperature hit, you're not playing high school athletics. So we have to rely a lot on the coaches and the athletes and the players to know when it's too hot to play on these fields.
But you mentioned 90 degrees had been the trigger that you find.
I'm sorry if I said that. I wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a specific temperature.
Let me just adjust what the committee did. We went back the last 5 years, from April 1st to October 31st, and we charted all the 90-degree days. So if we went every April, which is it's going to be 5 years or 150 days, it was a total of 2. May, there was a total of 5. June, there was a total of 13. July was a total of 47. August, 11. September, 11. October, none. If you want to just go, we can go the other way. We can go 210 days per year from April 1st to October. So last year we had 12 out of 210. 2014 we had 6. 2013 we had 19. 2012 we had 22. 2011 we had 12, and 2010 we had. That's over 90 degrees. So our biggest run of over 90 degrees were July.
Chair, are we talking about 90 degrees
Or higher.
temperature or
Temperature.
90 degrees at the surface, playing surface?
All I did was temperature. We didn't have the surface temperature. We were talking about 90-degree day when
Because you can have an 80-degree day and have a 90-degree ambient temperature at the surface.
you could. It depends on the time of day too. Though it could be an angle of the sun. No, we didn't actually go to a field because we don't have a field. We just took the average aqua temperature, and that's what we came up. That should be in your addendum package.
And why we asked for that is because it plays into usable hours for the general public. so.
And you had asked about plowing fields.
Yeah, and how late in a season
Yeah,
can the field?
we usually don't advise it. If done improperly, it can severely damage the field. Many universities do it because they need their lacrosse programs out there February 1st playing. Lately, we've been encouraging those who choose to do it to hire out to professionals. And basically, they're out there in a snowfall, and this year was pretty easy on them. But for every 3 inches of snow off that falls, you have to get 2 inches off. The sooner you let too much accumulate, you're not going to be able to push it off without risking damaging your field even more. And now these schools, a few of them that I've been to that plow all the time, you'll go out there and surrounding the field is just piles of infill. They've just pushed it all around. So we strongly urge, and we haven't seen a municipality do it yet, to be honest. It's usually private school colleges that can afford to do it when it needs to be done. So not a big fan of plowing fields, but it can be done. They make special blades for it. You can actually snow blow it, but you're always leaving about an inch of snow there and then letting that melt off. Again, I would recommend against it.
Before we bring the field committee members up to answer some of the other things, I want to take a minute to look at, because you put together these quotes.
Yes.
And so these are basically the bare minimum to grade the field, the drainage, to put the carpet down, the fill, so earthwork, reconstruct the D zones and the pits that had to be moved, long jump, high jump, or whatever. And the only addition is lights at Central.
Correct.
Okay, there's no additional bleachers, no bathrooms, no walkways, no nothing.
We have alternate items listed there below, but they're below the line.
And the alternative fills will average about 500,000 for both fields, depending on.
It's a fair number. There's a lot of variation in it. We're tracking it. It's changing all the time. It's such a new market.
Yes.
Along those lines, right now you have, I'm just looking at Easterns right now, 109,000 square, 110,000 square feet, $440,000. Down below under optional improvements, replace crumb rubber with sand infill or alternative infill, $300,000. Is that on top of 440,000, or is there
That's an on top number, so that's the high end.
So even though you're not going to use the rubber system, the sand rubber system, we're gonna.
One thing I did forget to mention, and just before I'm done here, the shock pad also adds one additional benefit. If indeed, we know there's studies out there on crumb rubber, and if indeed something was to change in the findings, we don't anticipate it, and we just don't expect it to happen. But by having the pad, if the field's relatively new, say 2 to 4 years old, you could go in there, remove the infill, and replace it with something else. If you recall, when I passed around all those alternate infills, they pretty much all had one thing in common. They required the pad to be safe. So if it's worth noting, that's an additional reason. We still propose the pad because we feel it's the safest route to go, and that's for player safety. It's nothing to do with the infill.
Orlando, you have a question?
I have a couple questions. Just on the comment you just made, so if we were to go forward and put in the STR and it came back and the study showed that it should be replaced, that's an additional cost to our city.
That's an additional cost.
Would your company be willing to pay for part of that, since you're making a recommendation and now we're going to need to go spend more money based on your recommendations? Would you consider it? I don't need an answer now, but that's a question we're going to come back with.
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask you, Mike, is it Mike?
You want to think about that? I had to think about that? I just was hoping he would say something.
So Kevin, you said to us that our outdoor artificial turfs do not represent an elevated health risk.
That's what the studies, the 29 different studies that we have, I have a summary of with us. It's about 900 pages in reports that we could find for you, that we have in our system.
So I have a copy of that letter that came out January 20th of 2015. And are you familiar with the article that came out from the Connecticut Mirror dated February 12th, Shifting Ground for Artificial Turf in Connecticut, which
Yes.
which rescinds that statement? It rescinds basically Connecticut's own?
This is
Okay.
from Connecticut, Senator Scanlon, February 26, 2016, that reiterates that. So that, if you'll notice that article, we're interviewed in there, Mylona McBroom. And we entertained the interview and it took no exception to the discussion that was had. If I believe that that's the same article.
I think it is. So we're talking then that this Connecticut review or the study still determines that additional investigation needs to occur.
Oh, everyone says that
To find
additional
the
should always
risks.
occur. We even agree that you can never study something too much.
All right.
But this statement just reiterates Connecticut Department of Health's position, and this is dated last month.
I don't have a copy of that one, so.
You can have mine if you'd like.
Okay. And they talk about elevated health risks. What health risks are you concerned of? What are the elevated health risks?
We are not, based on the studies that are out there, we're not concerned with elevated health risks. We don't believe that these fields pose an elevated health risk to human health. I'm not a doctor, though. All I can rely on is the studies that are out there and presented to me, of which we rely on about 29 of those. We know of at least 60 studies. But again, we worked with a team here. We brought them the facts about crumb rubber and alternate infill. And today here, we're presenting our design that has crumb rubber associated with it.
So I've spoken to some orthopedic surgeons who actually work in Bristol and have said that there are elevated health risks with respect to ACL injuries, increased ACL injuries, increased ankle injuries.
I've seen mixed studies on all that, but...
So then you agree, there is that potential?
There's studies out there. Yep. I tore my ACL on normal grass, so...
And I just want to make a comment. I played on AstroTurf early on when it was, experimental, I guess, at best. I think it's an excellent thing for the city. I really do. I think Southington's got it. They get lots of use out of it. Orlando mentioned the elevated health risks, with the ACL and stuff. I think you have elevated risks with natural turf fields, also with occasional and unpredictable soft spots, especially after inclement weather, especially when we're going through frozen conditions to not so frozen conditions. So, from a health standpoint, I still think you're better off with a synthetic turf.
I think a lot of the studies when it comes to lower extremity injury, when they say natural grass fields, unfortunately they're talking about some of the best natural grass fields out there that are used maybe 10 hours a week, if that are perfectly level and free of rocks and ditches and debris, and we just know that's not the case with many of the fields around here.
Are there other questions on the actual construction? I want before we have the public come up, just have the field committee talk about availability of hours for the community. I'd also like to have them touch upon scheduling and then talk about what kind of fees would be charged for groups to use the field and what their plan and an idea for that is. But I didn't want to cut, Jake, you had a question?
Yes, maybe I have one more question, if you don't mind. You've been in it for 10 years. What's the percentage of field that you have with crumb rubber and the other option more expensive? Is it?
I've designed 2 alternate infill fields, and I've been averaging about 8 fields a year. So I haven't done 80 fields, but I've probably designed 40. So 2 out of 40 are alternate infill.
And my understanding is that Southington have crumb rubber and so Farmville, and I know Farmington have it as well.
Correct.
So the kid, that when they go around, they must go around and play everywhere, right? They must play as we speak, whether they play in Bristol or elsewhere in the neighborhood, they must play on crumb rubber. Thank you. That's all.
Okay. All right, then, Ed, are you presenting? Chris, okay.
Good evening. Included in your packet was a usage chart. We were asked to come up with a plan for what the availability would be for the school system, or for the public, being that the fields were proposed to be put on the 2 high schools.
in the packet that was provided to you, I looked at the usage of the fields at Bristol Eastern. The reason I use Bristol Eastern is we currently have lights at Bristol Eastern. But the type of schedule that would occur at Bristol Central would be almost identical. What I did in the chart is I broke down field usage Monday through Friday, being that the school would certainly be using the field after school during the school year for our practices or for games. And also broke down the field usage on Saturdays and Sundays. Which you can see by looking at the chart, our highest usage is in the fall, in September and October. So if you look at September and October, we used from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock, Monday through Friday. We used 27% of the time, in September, and 24% in October. So being that the school, Monday through Friday, between 6 o'clock in the evening and 10 o'clock at night, we would be using the field approximately 25% of the time, being that it's available to the public 75% of the time. 75% of the time. On the weekend, the usage goes up considerably to the community. We don't have a lot of practices, we don't have a lot of games. We will occasionally have a scrimmage maybe in soccer on a Saturday. We have our JV football games if they're at home. Again, those are usually 5, and which would mean we'd be utilizing those fields for maybe 3 or 4 hours on a Saturday morning. But you can see, again, the community availability on the weekends is upwards of about 90-95%. So there would be a tremendous amount of availability to the public. We have far less usage in our fields during the spring. In April is the beginning of our season. Again, I took projections based upon our night schedule for events this spring at Bristol Eastern. And again, in May, we're looking at about 31. It was a little high, we're having a lot of lacrosse games this year, but about 31%, meaning the public Monday through Friday would certainly have access to those fields, 60-65% of the time. Any questions on? I have a question right off the bat. Sure. Is there some sort of plan to make scheduling of this? Let's say some organization wants to get some field time. Will there be some sort of online schedule that they can, maybe look at and say, okay, it looks like it's blocked off. How do we put some sort of online request so this is not a phone tag issue?
Sure. What happens now with field permitting at the schools, and I know that it's often been a concern about the scheduling and the amount of use. Currently, right now, all of the school field permits go through my office. I currently have about 50 field permits at all of our schools being used throughout the spring and into the summer. I even already have some requests for the fall. What normally happens in today's situation, people will contact my office, usually via email. Many of the organizations have been using the field permits for many years. Little League, the 3 Little Leagues in town, Legion, Bristol Soccer Club, lacrosse. They usually have those forms, or when they contact me, I provide them for them. Our plan is to just take those forms and then put them online. As far as scheduling programs, there's been a lot of talk about what type of a scheduling program we could use. Currently, what I do works for me. Has been using a calendar built within an Excel spreadsheet. Gives me a kind of a master calendar of all of our fields. We do have access to a program called School Dude or FS Direct, which has a scheduling program that the Board of Ed already owns. I plan to start making that transition over to using FS Direct. That is not something the public would have access to. What our thought was is we would take if you see Cheshire, Southington, what they do is they create a Google Calendar, and they put that on the Board of Ed website. And it lets people go and see what that availability might be. They won't be able to go online and physically reserve the field online, but it gives them the contact information and the forms and see what that availability would be.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Chris, would that school dude have the ability to, in real time, upload to Google?
No, again, I don't believe so. I don't believe so. It's relatively new for me to go and be moving over to School Dude. I don't think they're connected.
I know, like I said, I can refer to Southington, I refer to Cheshire. They have an online registration system where people can, they charge in Southington, where people can pay online, but it's really just kind of putting a deposit down, putting their amount down. They use, I believe, PayPal. I know the committee has discussed, I know the park department currently has an online payment system, so we would be investigating that. If the committee has decided at this point, we would look to be charging for community use, and we would look to kind of piggyback or mirror the type of system that the park department has.
I have a question, and you might be able to answer this, but I'm sorry, it might be back to you guys. I know Southington has an issue with being able to only use that field in certain instances for one sport at a time. But if they had some sort of netting up, they'd be able to utilize it for a number of sports at the same time, or at least a couple uses. Is there anything like that talked about in this plan? Because I know that is a major concern down there, and that would probably open the field up to even greater use.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with that facility. I do know it's a synthetic turf facility, but I don't know all the amenities that they incorporated in the design. Typically, what we like to incorporate it at a minimum, and usually because cost is a driving factor, ball safety netting, as that's what we call it, and it goes along the interface of the D zone. So the areas outside the field, about 15 feet off along the D zones, and it can be within the synthetic turf. And at a minimum, during initial construction, we put the sleeves in the ground. And then we put a plastic cap over that actually gets turf glued to it, infill goes over it. It's usually a different color, so it can be identified. Then, when funding permits, you can go buy ball safety nets, posts, nets, and all the hardware. So those run along the D zone. It gets a little trickier when you try to do it along the side of the track and along the side of the field and track interface. National Federation of High School Standards has a rule that there can't be an obstruction within 1 meter of your running lane. So on a narrow field like Bristol Central, where your sideline is going to be right there and then your lane line, you may not have enough space to incorporate that netting. So that's going to limit you, running track while playing lacrosse. We don't find it's much of a problem to run track while soccer's going on.
Right.
But by having those nets in the D zone, now you can shoot soccer goals, you can shoot lacrosse goals, you can shoot field hockey goals, or whatever sports you're playing. And in that area, the D zone is going to be protected.
Okay.
So we have incorporated those a lot into the design, and they're considered here.
Okay, yeah, because that'll make a huge difference. I've been down Southington a number of occasions, and that has been an issue on probably
New turf field in this past fall. And they were, I believe, the first, I think maybe the only school in Connecticut to go with a new form of infill. You have actually EnviroFill, which was passed around, it was green, it was in the plastic container. They're the only school system, to my knowledge, that has used it in Bristol. So a few of the committee members and myself went out and looked at the field, walked it, met with their athletic director. They didn't finish construction until, I think, approximately November 1st. They only had one, maybe 2 football games on it. Soccer season was just about over by the time they used it. But they had those nets up in the D zones that you were referring to.
okay.
They were up the day that we were there. And you could see they're pretty easily to take out the poles and to remove them. But it certainly does improve the playability, and it was impressive to see. We certainly not an expert on infill, but because there's been a lot of conversations about it, this EnviroFill being one of them, Milo and Broom provided me with a number of schools that are using EnviroFill. Again, South Windsor being the first one in Connecticut. But I contacted 2 schools in Ohio. One, I spoke to the athletic director of a school in Cincinnati. I also spoke to the park superintendent of a community in Ohio, both using EnviroFill. Raved about it. We're very pleased with its performance over the past. One had it about 10 years, one had it about 5 years. So again, we wanted to go out and do our due diligence and look out to the community, and again, South Windsor was the only field at the period of time that had it.
Did you talk to how you'll recoup fees, any fee structure you'll impose, and if that's burdensome to the taxpayers, or or what your plans are and what you would do with those funds.
The committee the committee decision, and certainly it is up for discussion if need be. The committee thought that the fee structure would be $100 an hour. That would be for the use of the field, for lights. That seems to be kind of the going rate through some of the communities. Oftentimes we hear back to Southington. I spoke extensively with their athletic director. What they do is, if it is a city organization, like for instance, in Southington, their youth program is affiliated with their park department. So there's obviously a reciprocal agreement with the park department. The park department does not pay that cost, but other community organizations would pay. And the committee, in agreement with the mayor, the plan would be to create a separate fund, and all of the income that is generated through the use of the fields would go in to help offset the cost of maintenance, because as was mentioned earlier, there still is maintenance costs associated with the fields, although be it less than what our current maintenance costs are.
Let me clarify that. Board of Ed is going to pay what they're currently paying now for their fields. Any additional costs above that number, this fund will pay for.
Correct. And then any additional, hopefully that fee would, or that pot would grow. And when it comes time, because as we mentioned, there is certainly a life expectancy of the field. If there's money that is left over from the maintenance costs and operations costs, that money would be used to help offset the replacement costs down the road.
Now, I had asked this question, I'm going to ask you again because you answered it. Is that $100 per hour burdensome to our lacrosse teams, to our little leagues? How do they pay that now, and is that burdensome?
It would certainly be a change in the Bristol's formats. The park department, and I don't want to speak for Ed and what his rates, when someone uses a park department field, gets a permit, there is a fee associated with the use of their fields. The Board of Ed currently doesn't do that, and I know there's been conversations over the last several years talking about, ongoing maintenance of the fields, and maybe, could they be lined, could they be, baseball fields dragged and whatnot. Because we've never charged the community for the use of those fields. The Board of Ed certainly hasn't, is not in the field maintenance position for the community. So it certainly would be a change from our current structure. The plan would not be to be charging for our traditional grass fields like we permit now, but would be for the use of the synthetic field. Currently I don't, because all the permits go through me, I don't permit the two synthetic fields, the two game fields at the two high schools, because obviously we're trying to keep them in the best possible shape we can. If you notice, I'll point out Bristol Central, for instance, which is the board on the left. Just underneath the field, you see a large gray area. That happens to be our practice football field at Bristol Central. It's very difficult in practice conditions to kind of maintain that field. If you look at Bristol Eastern, which is on the right, it is actually, if you're thinking of a clock, it's at 3 o'clock, you can see that strip down the middle. We try to move our practices around as much as possible. But what we don't have the ability to do is to rest our fields. Currently, and I'll speak of soccer fields at this point because this would be a combination of football, soccer, lacrosse field. I currently am permitting, with the exception of the high schools, West Bristol, Green Hills, Northeast, and 2 fields at Chippenshill 7 days a week from, I believe, next week through June 30th. So what happens is you have, and that is not fulfilling all of the requests. Some groups have asked for the front field, the King Street field at Bristol Eastern, which I've had to deny because we use that for our lacrosse programs. We stagger our practices, so sometimes our practices may not get over on that front field until 6:30, 7 o'clock. So I'm not permitting it. So we have an early practice and a late practice. What these fields would allow us to do is, in inclement weather, we either have to go inside or we go on that field and try to minimize the damage that we do to the fields. This would give us playability. If all of a sudden we had inclement weather, our teams needed to practice, or we had a game, we would stay off of those practice fields, go onto the turf field, again, after school, which will then allow, hopefully, for our fields to have a little longer life, or to, again, allow us to rest those fields.
Chris, I'm trying to think, with the fee structure we came up with, I think we got that from Southington, didn't we?
Correct.
Okay, so that's, we're not reinventing it.
Correct.
That's what we came up with the numbers.
If you look on, again, and I'm not saying Southington is the end-all be-all, we're Bristol, we're a different community, and if we decide we need a different fee structure, we can certainly go up with a different fee structure. They have kind of an a la carte menu, so if you were to go onto the Southington website to their athletic turf field, they have it's $100 an hour for their field, $100 for lights. If you want to use the restroom facilities, there's a cost to that. If you want to use their scoreboard or sound system, there's a cost to that. So they have kind of an a la carte menu. Our intent, because obviously these fields don't have restroom facilities, we currently use porta potties for our games at this point. That's what we would do, certainly in the interim. If we ever are fortunate enough to have money down the road and we could expand our facilities, that's a different story, but we're certainly not looking to do that, initially. Our plan is not to open up the facilities at that time.
Other questions at this point?
Two for Chris.
Yes.
What do you propose to permit?
Designed for baseball, softball. If they wanted to allow, a team wanted to come out and use those fields or permit those fields for maybe some additional practices, it's early in the season. This year we were very, very fortunate weather-wise. Last year was horrific. We didn't get on our fields, some of us, until a week prior to the start of our season. So what it would allow us to do, certainly would allow the community to do, would be to go on and use those fields possibly for a baseball and softball practice. When I said I spoke to an athletic director in Ohio, not that I would encourage this in Bristol, but they had said they had so much rain last year that they had a very difficult time scheduling their senior softball game, which was very big and it would be as important as in our community. They actually laid out a field on their football field to allow for a softball game to be played. But not that I would encourage that we do that, but if little leagues or softball teams needed tryouts to get out and the weather didn't permit for them to use our grass fields like last year, we certainly could look to do that.
Well, so I'm asking because we're talking about community availability. There's 88% of the time these fields are going to be available to the community. Now, I'm not certain of the number of people in Bristol or surrounding communities that are involved in organized lacrosse, soccer, or football that are adults. I think it's probably small. But could I, and I'm just making something up, can I rent a field and go play bocce? Can I go fly my drones on a field? Can I race cars?
The race cars, I understand that.
I meant RC cars.
I would say probably, I think that would be a committee that would, a decision that would be made by the committee. We would certainly want to look at what the potential hazards might be to the fields, and we certainly would want to do anything that could cause that harm.
But your question is, as a private citizen, could you rent the field to have a pickup football game?
Sure.
Sure, absolutely. What you would need to do, in addition, obviously, to that cost, and we require this of all permittees for all of our fields, is that there is liability insurance. So we would require that, and we do that now, that people have insurance because we want to make sure that our community is.
So the second question was this sheet that came out, and I don't know if Ed, you drew it up or Chris, you did, but it's the costs, it's the turf maintenance cost for synthetic turf maintenance?
That, I believe...
I think that was the one that came out last month.
Yes.
Today?
What I did is, again, those are our rough estimates.
Sure.
We currently use a private vendor who does the mowing of our fields at our high schools. We'll do the preliminary prep work prior to the beginning of our season, oversees our pest management control system. Does not do the day-to-day lining and so on, game prep of our fields. As the mayor indicated in the agreement that was the committee and the board had agreed to, is that we would continue with our current structure of paying that contract. So currently I asked our vendor to give me estimates as to what, if we took those fields offline and you no longer had to mow those two fields, you no longer had to do any type of maintenance to them, prep work, overseeding, deal with any issues that we might have,
what would our approximate savings be? And it would be about $29,000. Included in, which is not included in his costs, would be our labor costs and painting of football, soccer, lacrosse, which is about $29,000. If we were to leave that contract virtually where it is, our thought is that we would continue to use their services. They currently do the maintenance on several colleges and high schools throughout the state. We would absorb that cost into our current budget, the Board of Ed. You can see, excuse me, so there would be a savings of approximately $29,000. We would continue to pay that money, but we'd save about $29,000. Then he broke down what his projected cost would be, as was mentioned earlier, the static brushing, the occasionally going over it with a magnet to pull up any type of metal that may be on the surface. GMAX testing, I believe we said in our contract that we would incorporate into our contract yearly GMAX testing, but if there was additional GMAX testing that we wanted to check, he certainly could provide that service for us. So his cost would be for his maintenance approximately $18,000 a year, so the savings of about $11,000 a year towards maintenance. Now, if the recommendation is, and it is approved, that we use the crumb rubber, there is, as was mentioned earlier, there is some migration of the crumb rubber that occurs throughout the use. So after 2 or 3 years, there may be some crumb rubber that needs to be added into it. If the decision is to go with that alternative infill, when I spoke to those 2 directors out in Ohio, they said there's very little migration. Again, there's additional cost to that. Very little migration. Once in 5 years, they've added none. So, again.
So it's 14,000. It says per ton dash 7 tons. It's per ton, it's 14,000?
It's about $1,000, correct me if I'm wrong, it's about $1,000 a ton for crumb rubber. If we're talking a replacement value, so that $14,000 was after the second or third year. If it was estimated that we needed approximately 7,000 pounds at $1,000 a pound for each school, there would be, after that second or third year, possibly a cost of about approximately $14,000 if we needed to do that replacement. And again, our thought would be that would be absorbed by, one, our savings and our normal maintenance, and also by fees that would be collected.
Okay. Any other questions for Chris before?
I got one other question. This question just goes to the scheduling and the rates too. Maybe everybody can have an opinion about this. I'm sure is our youth programs have enough money, have enough trouble coming up with their own funding just to keep these kids in the uniforms and complying with safety and all that stuff. Is there any kind of break we give our own youth programs as opposed to renting it out to outside?
The committee hasn't made a decision. It certainly would be up for discussion. But again, currently, there is no charge.
Okay.
So,
no, I mean, going forward with the turf field.
What we did talk about was, this is our first year, so like anything else, there's a learning curve. So we did talk about, we had a long discussion about what our fees were going to be. And when we all came to an agreement, we said, we'll revisit this after a year. After a year, we may say, there's no issues, leave it. We may say, we could raise it, lower it, but we'll know more after the field's been used and see what kind of usage it gets.
What I know some communities, I know what some communities have done also is to offset that cost for those youth groups is they've added an additional $5 to their registration fee. So there are certainly different ways that we can look at funding, but again, I think that's the committee, it's our first year going down this road. We thought we'd go with that fee structure, but it's certainly up for discussion.
And just so everybody's aware who's on the, I'm sorry, through the chair. So everyone's aware who's on the, when you keep saying the committee, it's myself, Dr. Sola, the Board of Ed Superintendent, Park Director, Ed, School Athletic Director, Chris. We have Board of Finance Chairwoman, when she was able to make it.
You'd have them in the middle of the day. It was hard for me to make them.
And I think that was it on the committee, wasn't it?
Chris Wilson.
Chris Wilson, the Board of Ed Chairman.
All right, at this point, then if we can bring Chris back up, we can bring Ed back up. I would like to open this up to the members of the public. This will not be a Q&A. We would just like for you to question, our consultants or Chris. Basically is to share your comments, and we'd ask you to keep it, to a minimum of a few minutes. I don't want to have to ring a bell for anybody, but it is getting late, but we do want to hear from you. So we didn't have a sign-up sheet, so I'm just going to ask you to, graciously, line up in the back as you want to speak, and who would like to go first?
And give your name as you come to the podium.
Name and address, right. Oh, we have a volunteer. And if anybody else wants to follow, if you just cue yourself under the clock, that would be great.
I'm familiar with 3-minute time limits. Chris Wilson, Board of Education. I just want to echo my concerns that I've echoed in committee concerning the bleachers. It didn't appear that your motion included any allocation for any of the optional items below the line. And I'm concerned, and I'm expressing the concern of our principal people injured, especially at Bristol Central, that crowd control and safety would be a big concern of his, especially if we had football games on a Friday night up at the campus and we didn't have bleachers built into the plan and appropriated. And he would have a very difficult time providing security and safety for all of our fans. And so I hope that when you consider this item that you provide allocation for appropriate amount of bleachers at the two campuses. Thank you.
Oh, wait, Chris, Eastern has bleachers right now, right?
They do. I don't know if it's sufficient.
But at least they have something.
They do have something
So
now.
if we were to just-
But, yeah, I'm most concerned certainly about Central.
That's your main.
My main concern, but I want to make sure that we have appropriate bleachers for all the fans that want to see our games. It's probably only most important, but if we start having Thanksgiving Day games at our campus sites as opposed to at Muzzy, 1,000 is not going to be sufficient, for a Muzzy day.
Yep.
And I know it's hard to build in a plan for once a year or twice a year, but I think it is important that we, make sure that we provide for that safety and security on our campus facilities. Our principals and their leadership, try to make sure that everybody's safe. And if we don't have bleachers and we have people milling, on the outside, it's not a safe environment, and that's what we're concerned about.
Thank you.
Question. Well, I'm going to ask Ed a question. Ed, if we relocate and renovate existing Muzzy Field bleachers for $150, how many seats does that allow?
If we were to take the Muzzy Field bleachers out, we could do about 900 seats.
Okay, thank you.
And one more question. So that's on both, I see the Muzzy bleachers on the eastern side too. Is that a separate set of bleachers, or is that the same?
No, I think they were just trying to go 2 in 1, maybe they're in 3 sections, so you figure if they go 2 in 1, 600 on one, 300 on the other. I think they would be a temporary use, or you'd have to retrofit them. I'm not sure exactly if there is a standard. Right now, the Muzzy bleachers don't have the risers.
Right.
You may have to retrofit them, but that could be a possibility, because we just refitted them with regular seat tread, so it is a possible savings that you would be able to use, because we could drive them up there, so that would be something to do.
Thank you. Next, please.
Catherine Telford, 76 Chestnut Street. I'm not opposed to the new athletic fields in Bristol. We just need the best fields to produce the best athletes. What I am opposed to is the crumb rubber infill. The town of Wilton has recently come down and changed their position. They do have the crumb rubber infill fields, and they are switching out to the organic coconut husk fields. They've taken 3 factors into consideration, and that was the safety of all their athletes, because elevated risk means a higher risk than natural grass. You just have a risk of injury. Elevated risk means there is a greater risk of twisting your ankle, getting your cleat stuck into the crumb rubber. And they also looked at the playability, how many sports are being played on the field, and the environmental effects. And this was reversed their decision, so they're removing their field. Also, the 29 studies that you can show and to go along with that crumb rubber infill is fine. You can also find 29 other studies that state otherwise. with the percentage of chemicals and carcinogens that are in that crumb rubber infill. And, you know, the air temps were stated at 90 degrees. Didn't hear anything about the field temperatures, though. And what happens when you have 80-degree temperatures going for 20 days? No rain. What are the field temperatures then? Are the kids going to be dealing with 300-degree temperatures on the ground? Also, playing in other towns on crumb rubber fields is, what, a couple hours? There are a couple hours you're playing. When you're practicing, you're putting in a whole lot more hours than just 2 hours a week, say, to go on somebody else's town turf that has a crumb rubber. Other than that, it's just mainly the safety issue for the crumb rubber infill. It has not been proven neither safe nor harmful. So there is also the risk. And I wonder if, in all these costs, was it projected how much it would cost to take out these fields and then replace them in the future? Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, Frank.
My name is Frank Kramer. I live on 40 Crescent Drive in Bristol. And I'm kind of awestruck over the fact that I don't think that there has been expert testimony from the other points of view regarding crumb rubber or even the plastic blades, which, by the way, contain lead, and they decompose with time. And lead is extremely dangerous to young kids. But I'm going off a bit of track here. I'm just wondering, the gentleman from Malone and McBroom cited 29 studies, and perhaps even more. And I'm wondering how many of those studies, sir, were based in the field turf industry's realm of approval. In other words, were they industry-based, industry paid for? Because I have certainly read enough information that quite a bit of them were. And in fact, the experts who had discussed favorably the attributes and virtues of hazardous waste, by another name, being laid on playing fields where children are going to play and be exposed to carcinogens, they were also paid for by the industry. So the veracity of some of these studies, I think, might be held into question. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but I think most rational and intelligent people might. And I'm also wondering if, indeed, you've had experts from the other side or the other point of view come and discuss this matter with you as well. Has that happened? Because Catherine and I, and a couple of others are not experts. We're laymen. We're winging this. And we're just kind of calculating all the truths, the half-truths, the sins of omission that have taken place in regards to synthetic turf. So I'm wondering, this is not rhetorical, because I think you guys could answer this, and I think, Shirley, you can too. Has there been an alternate point of view presented in the same manner that Malone and McBroom, and perhaps some other experts, have testified to?
This is our first presentation in front of the Board of Finance, so. Yeah.
Well, in front of the Board of Finance. I think some of you also sit on the Synthetic Turf Council right now.
Okay, but Frank, I'm not going to do a Q&A.
Okay.
If you want to share your points.
Well, I think that's an important point that's been overlooked all these months as we proceed on this path to installing hazardous waste on, or fostering it on young children who can hardly afford that kind of exposure. But talking about lead, you know, we had an incident where you reacted very promptly and quickly to. I mean, no flint here. You took care of it quickly, rapidly. You understood the risks. In fact, you said in an article in the Bristol Observer, we're here to protect the health and I'm paraphrasing here, the health of our workers. I'm asking you because it was lead that we're talking about. It wasn't airborne, but it was lead dust that was clinging to surfaces, just as lead dust clings to the surface after degradation in crumb rubber and blades of grass, or the false plastic blades. Why don't you feel the same way about that? They're the same thing. In fact, it's actually worse, because children in the formative stages of growing up are very prone to neurological mishap and cancers when they ingest lead. So I'm just very...
Could I just have you wind up? Thank you.
I'm done.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think there's anything else I could add that would perhaps change anybody's mind on this. It's kind of like a sense of cognitive distance.
Thank you, Frank.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other members? Okay. Thank you.
I saw that picture at the post office.
Tim Gamache, 79 seconds. Just one quick point. The carcinogenic properties of the crumb rubber, they're not going to manifest themselves for probably years to come. That's just a point I think you need to take into consideration. While this might be, we're hearing one, I agree with Frank that we're only hearing one side of the issue. You really need to consider whether or not we're taking care of our kids, because I'm more worried about what they're going to be doing 15, 20, 25 years from now. They're going to be being treated for cancer or whatever because of what we're doing here today, when we do have other alternatives available to us. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public?
Sean Rest, 53 Lancaster Road. I'm not an expert on crumb rubber either, but I do happen to look at a lot of legislation coming through the state. Raised HB number 5149, session year 2016, is an act concerning beneficial end uses for discarded tires. And I was looking at the testimony of our DEP commissioner. It's Department of Environmental. You guys should know what that is. Basically, well, he's been the commissioner since 2014, chief of staff since 2011. It's a state agency charged with conserving and protecting the state's natural resources and environment and providing first-rate outdoor recreational opportunities. In his testimony, he happened to include an addendum. So you can see this on the State of Connecticut website. You can read the entire addendum. As part of the addendum, he included a document called the Product Stewardship Institute Briefing Document, which is dated March 25th, 2015. I thought if you might be interested, if you haven't already made up your minds, which is what it feels like. And it says in it, owing to the increased cost of scrap tire material over gravel, wood, mulch, recyclers that manufacture rubber recreational products today rely on government subsidies. To encourage the use of scrap tires in recreational applications, some states offer grants and this potential to increase the use of crumb rubber and loose fill materials for playgrounds and even horse arenas. Crumb rubber, compared to pea gravel or mulch, provides greater cushion than traditional materials when children fall, etc. Even so, health and safety concerns regarding artificial turf fields and playgrounds made with crumb rubber from scrap tires could be a significant barrier to market growth in this area. There's some concern that the material can be dirty, leave black marks or smudges on clothes or shoes, can have a strong rubber smell, that there could be steel fragments left in the tires that could cause harm, and that crumb rubber could burn should someone put out a cigarette or otherwise ignite the surface. Furthermore, human health concerns have been raised over the past several years. In California, Senate Bill 47, the Children's Safe Playground and Turf Field Act of 2015, calls for a ban until January 1st, 2018 on installation or contracting of new installation of artificial turf made from recycled tires from the boundaries of a public or private school or public recreational park. It would also require the further study of potential adverse health effects from the use of scrap tires as artificial turf. The Los Angeles Unified School District Office of Environmental Health and Safety also issued a safety alert in December 2014 related to concerns about lead content of chrome rubber. In this alert, the LAUSD indicated that it had removed artificial turf from early educational centers, and in 2009 it had removed recycled chrome rubber from design specifications and replaced it with infill material from non-recycled sources. So I know people are going to say I'm anti-field or whatever, but that's not the case. I just wanted to let you guys know. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak? Okay, I would just like to have one more input put in, and Glenn, I'm going to turn to you, and could you kind of talk about the impact to our capital budget in this effect, and kind of just in 3 minutes or less now, kind of talk about where we are right now based on the current capital budget. The capital 10-year committee just met. I think it's fair as a Board of Finance, we're aware of the cost. So could you just kind of give us a summary? And I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Well, I don't mind, that's what I'm here for. If as presented, you're looking at $2,940,000. There may be some additional costs, as Chris pointed out, with bleachers and safety concerns and things like that. A mill is approximately $4.1 million, so this is around, I'm guessing, 0.8 mils as far as the cost, but it would obviously be bonded. So a concern that the board should have is that, let's assume it was rounded to $3 million. I mean, that's going to be bonded over the course of probably 17 to 18 years is what we go out with. So it's not really going to be $3 million. It's going to be $3 million plus the interest over the course of 18 years. So, I can't venture to obviously say this. It's a low interest rate environment we're in, but $3 million over 18 years with interest is probably going to bring into the neighborhood of $5 million plus. So, that's probably a ballpark, maybe a little bit less or more. But that's what you got to consider. I mean, and you've got the existing projects, and as I pointed out when we started with the 10-year plan. I mean, what's the priority in the community? And it should be usually in a 10-year plan, it's usually public safety first. Some of the roads that you heard about earlier, he mentioned were a safety situation, deterioration of sidewalks, and that is caused by flooding and things like that. So you need to make a determination if, I'm not going to, obviously I don't live here, so I'm not one way or another, but I do live in Southington, and I was on the Board of Finance when that decision was made. And it was a very controversial decision, just like it seems to appear to be here. Tim was right. I think, my concerns at the time were down the road. What happens 10 years playing with that down the road? There is a concern, and it has popped up in Southington about the metal in that can occur. So blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line is that, it's not going to be $3 million. It's going to be more than that because we're going to bond it.
Right now, our capital project, let's see, where are we at? We're looking at about $30 million. That's on the current list right now, right?
Yes, and I would not recommend that because we're...
I know. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to open this up for questions back to Chris, to our consultants. Could you just quickly talk about the lead issue that was brought up, the lead, and I think this is in the fiber of the blades, correct?
Also the chrome rubber.
So the artificial turf we're talking about with sand and other infill in there is considered third generation turf. Prior to that, you had what more people consider AstroTurf. It was a non-infilled, it's a knitted nylon. Back in New Jersey, many of those original fields, which date back, third generation started around late 90s, so these fields are prior to that. There was lead. Lead was in the core of those nylon fibers, and when the nylon wore off, lead could be exposed. As far as I know, all those fields are offline. There was many in LA, there was many in New Jersey. Those were the ones that I recall making the news. The industry claims there's no lead in the fibers, not to any level, even remotely close to acceptable levels in the fibers there today.
There's no lead, or there is some lead?
I don't have that exact, I can't say. I would like to say, I don't know the answer to that. I don't have that. But my understanding is that when Yale did their studies, which are often referred to, they did identify chemicals and components of artificial turf, which no one will deny is in there. And this is crumb rubber, I'm sorry. And the levels of lead were well below 3 thresholds. Connecticut Department of Consumer Protection, a European toy standard, and then there was one other standard that basically the levels of lead that they found would equate to the levels of lead found in any typical garden soil.
Questions from the board to either Chris or our consultant?
I think and obviously I've made it clear that I'm in favor of a turf field, but I have a young child myself too, so, and she plays sports as well. So my only concern is ultimately, what is this stuff made of? I mean, we've got to have an MSDS on it. So if that's the case, then, I mean, that's
I think some of these items come up as non-detectable on those sheets.
Okay. All right.
But I can get those sheets for you. I don't have any on me.
And we should have the same with the crumb rubber, and we should have a report as well. I mean, the 90-degree temperature, I imagine, is not just for a matter of heat stroke. It's also a matter of at some point, a certain sustained temperature is going to activate a certain amount of off gases. And right, so I mean, I would imagine a sustained, 90 or 100, 110 degrees on the carpet, may actually give off these off gases, and those, in fact, are the things that are probably going to cause the most damage. So.
And again, we can direct you to studies where they have tested elevated heat temperatures. There are studies out there, though, where they put crumb rubber in an oven, heated it up to 800 degrees, mixed acid with it to break it down. So there are some, you have to look at what studies are appropriate when comparing to in the field, in situ use of the material. And there are tests that have been done that way, and we have shared that information with the committees we've worked with to this point.
My only concern as a board member, as a community member, as a father, is that whatever is out there is out there. What's going to be on our field? That's what I'm concerned with.
Understood. As a company, we would not design fields that we don't stand beside. We design natural grass fields just as much as we do synthetic turf, and it has nothing to do with that industry. So based on all the studies that we've compiled over the years, every argument that we've heard, we are alongside with the studies that we support, and that there's no elevated health risk with a crumb rubber or synthetic turf field.
What about long-term liability on the manufacturer's part for undetermined health risks? Now 15 years down the road, we have a rash of cancer cases.
I can't speak to the turf manufacturers.
That right there might be something you might want to come back with too, because obviously, God forbid something like that happens, the city's not going to want to foot the bill for all of that either. So it's certainly something we might want to consider as well.
Any other questions? Oh, Ron?
Yes, please. More a comment than a question. Again, I'm for the turf fields, but I do have reservations with crumb rubber. And I know if we have alternatives, I'd prefer for us to look at those alternatives.
Oh, I agree.
Rather than using crumb rubber.
I'm with you, Ron. I would not support crumb rubber. I would, if we're going to do this, there'd have to be an alternative.
Again, as Mr. Gamache said, when you think 10, 15 years down the line, the kids today that are playing on it, I have no idea what's going to happen, but I'd rather be safe than sorry.
Orlando was next.
Yeah, so I've got
I've got these studies, from Yale, it talks, the EHHH, Dr. Brown and others that talk about the carcinogenic effects, exposure to children long-term, especially children that are playing on it at a young, maturing age. They're on it, they're exposed longer than others. So there are a number of studies, I think, that would negate whatever studies your company has participated in and found in favor of. That aside, if we were to vote on and agree upon some other filling, an organic filling, right? So we're at the cost now of $3.5 million, roughly, right?
We're at 2.9.
Yeah, but if you add in...
Before the fill and before the bleachers.
Right. So if you're $3.5 million, right, and if you're looking at future value, present day costs, bonded over 18 years, that's a lot of grass cutting that Eddie can do with his folks. That's a lot of grass fields that you can buy and replace and dig up for $5 million. That's the point I want to make.
Okay. John Smith. Oh, Mike, did you have something? No? Okay.
Yeah, not so much in the area of question, but a comment. First of all, the environment, I can't tell you about environmental issues either, but I can tell you about urban fill. And if you dig a hole in your backyard, you're going to have lead and all kinds of nasty things in there. That's called urban fill, and you have to have it tested and whatever. We've been through that two or three times. But I would rather seek an alternative to from rubber, frankly, because I don't think we ought to take a chance, not really knowing all of the entire impact of that going forward. I think bleachers are absolute necessity. I don't think we can say to either high school, you can't use Muzzy Field for your football game, your soccer game. You go to Central or Eastern, but you can't sit down. You got to walk around, and I'm height restricted, so I would need stilts if I had and even with bleachers, I happen to have a family member who coaches football at Farmington High School. They have bleachers on both sides, and there's not enough room when they have most of their games. Both the visitor side and the home team side are loaded, and they have bleachers that I'm sure hold more than 900 people. The other side of it is the expense side, and I think we all need to be concerned about the expense side, because the city, we don't manufacture dollars here. But this is one of the things that is an expense, but it's also an investment. Because one of the issues we have with mowing is you can mow all day long, but we can't rest fields. So the number of complaints that the city gets because the fields are not appropriate for playing can never be solved unless we find a whole tract of land and say, okay, we're going to use this group of fields next year and that group the year after. We don't have the ability to rotate the use of fields the way in the Midwest, if you go to their major farms, they rotate crops. We can't do that here because we don't have the space to do it here. This is one way to solve that problem and allow the public to have more utilization of the space we have as opposed to what they have now. And I don't know the answer to that because we don't manufacture dollars, we don't manufacture land either. So I would support this, but I've got a real issue with crumb rubber.
Jake?
Okay, crumb rubber, first of all, there is, like you said, that when you dig in the backyard, there is a little bit of something in everything, right? Like I have a cabin in Maine, and there's arsenic in my well.
Yeah. But
it's an acceptable level, so I drink it. I got many grandchildren that's going to be playing on those fields, all around. And we have established that the kid here, when they go elsewhere, they play on crumb rubber, right? And we talk about in 10 to 15 years from now, when we see more and more of that of the result of the elevated health risk. But you said that the crumb rubber has been existing since 1990. Is it correct?
It's been existing a lot longer than that. It's been around as long as there's been tires on cars, but it was started to use as an infill product back around 97.
97, and so far if a kid was playing on it in '97, we 20 years down the road, right? And so that if there would have been something extravagant, we would have seen lawsuits and stuff like that.
There are.
Sure.
So let me ask the question. What, take away the crumb rubber, what's the next step up that you would recommend without going to the Cadillac most expensive one? What's the next one up?
But also, I'd like you to talk about the one that, for the concussions, because so address that when you talk about the
Sure.
Okay.
Well, we addressed the concussion concern by adding the shock pad.
Right.
So even under the base scenario that we've looked at, and again, we've looked at all scenarios with the committee, and we're not stuck to chrome rubber. We've looked at all the options. To ask me my preference for the next one, I can tell you what costs probably the next, another form of rubber is going to be your next most economical choice. And then you're going to move up to the coated sand, then the organic, and then the highest cost that, as I know it right now, is TPE, the thermoplastic. They're all, if you ask athletes, I imagine they're all going to feel different underfoot. They're all going to perform slightly different. And I think you get a variety of answers when you ask the user of the field. So it's a tough question for me to say what the next best option is. In South Windsor, we went out to bid with crumb rubber. We went out to bid with the coated sand and Envirofill, and we went out to bid with TPE. They decided they
TPE
want
was what?
thermoplastic.
Okay.
And just throwing numbers out there, Envirofill cost about $200,000 more for the field. TPE was closer to $300,000 more for the field. So, and that's just your standard size, equal quadrant, 90,000 square foot field.
No difference in life cycle, what life cycle?
No, we write into our spec that the infill needs to be under the 8-year warranty. As I mentioned, I've done 2 alternate infill fields, the first one being a TPE field about 5 years ago. It failed after 4 years. The manufacturer came in, said, here are your options. We can either go back to TPE, we can try something new. They chose to try something new. And feedback's been okay. They don't get an extended warranty for another 8 years at that point. They just get the end of their warranty when they need to replace the carpet. The coated sand comes with an 18-year warranty. I believe it's 16 or 18-year warranty. So, some go above and beyond. Some just stick with the typical manufacturer's warranty.
And I just want to go back, I know we have the shock pad, but the rubber does have some absorption that the sand doesn't, right?
Yeah, we could design a field without a shock pad that's safe. We can't do it with the other infills out there, except, and I think we were
Well, we
speaking...
want to keep this, but
Right.
I mean, what do we lose from rubber to sand as far as if we keep this? Is there an elevated risk of more concussion?
No, that pad
Okay.
still is going to be your safety.
Okay.
Yeah, that's going to take the shock absorbing.
So, I have through the chair.
Yes.
If we got rid of the crumb rubber from the tires, but we went to another rubber, does that still have, and maybe I'll ask Orlando this because you were asking the questions. If we went from the tires, get away from the tires, but then went to a pure Nike plastic, a Nike sneaker or whatever, what you've read, does that change anything?
From what I've read, most of the alternative fills have been a organic coconut type husk fill, whether it's throughout the country of Italy or out in the school system of LA. So I don't have that much information on that Nike plastic fill, I think especially since it's relatively new.
I can speak to the LA specification because I finally was able to track it down. They permit EPDM, TPE, organic, and they use a performance spec. My guess is with that, they're getting the cheapest product, which we found out, what we're finding out right now, EPDM is coming in on the lower end. Nike grind is an availability issue, and again, there's very limited testing on Nike grind, so I would support EPDM.
And that's, EPDM, tell us what that is again.
Don't ask me to spell out what
It's rubber roofing.
It's a rubber roofing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's virgin rubber.
Yeah.
It's virgin rubber from the lab. It's never been in a tire. It's not
Okay.
recycled. Yes.
And
It's a different composition.
What is the feedback on that versus the crumb rubber in a tire? Is it getting better?
It performs almost identically. But it costs a lot more.
But it doesn't have the metal in it? That sounds like a concern.
testing does not show that.
It has chemicals.
It has chemicals, yeah. It's made of, it's a rubber product.
Can we talk
Yeah, it's
about
oil-based,
the
petroleum.
Was there, I thought I don't know, was it weather-related? There was a problem with the husk or not? What?
Husks need moisture, so in Connecticut, we're in a favorable environment that if we get some rain, we probably don't have to irrigate the field. However, you have to monitor it. So you'll do a moisture test on the field. If it's too dry, you'll go out there and you'll water it, and you'll check it again. If you go through a couple-week drought, you know it's going to be dry and it's going to need a lot of water. Problem is, it needs water, it'll freeze. It's going to freeze, it'll be firm in the winter, you're not going to plow it and use that field. So that's one concern we have. We haven't done a field with it yet, so these are some of the concerns that I have as a designer. The irrigation, you have that added cost. The maintenance may be slightly different. It's going to break down over time because it is organic. So right now we're hearing that maybe once every other year, you go back and you put a bag or two of additional coconut husk, rice fiber husk in there.
You can also use cork.
Cork floats. Yeah, but cork floats in heavy rainfall and it's all on your track and off your field. I've seen many images that show that.
They could use a mixture.
Ed mentioned contact dermatitis allergies with coconut. In theory, it could occur. Again, I'm not an expert on coconut husks, organic fibers.
Some of the things that we can do, if I'm hearing the will of I think what's coming out very clearly here is this board does not want crumb rubber, and I'm speaking for, we didn't take a vote, but I can. But I think we're still kind of out on what kind of alternative fill, but that's something that we need more data on. I don't know if that could preclude a vote, or we could do a vote, or the will of the board. And then there's the issue of the bleachers. So I'm open to options to the board. Do you need more time? Do you want to take a vote and add a cost for bleachers and an alternative fill? I'm listening for recommendations and thoughts.
I would like to have more time, and I'd like to have the city council involved in the discussion also.
And Public Works.
And what, say it again? And who?
Public Works?
Why Public Works?
I think it was handling the materials. I mean, when they be involved in handling materials.
I think this would stay with Parks, but you want to see the MDS sheets, MSDS.
Through the chair, we can, if you're looking for alternatives, bid it with the three alternatives and see what we come up with a price on it. And you could have the coconut husk, you could have the sand, and I think what was the third one? EPDM. EPDM.
Okay.
Or not the or the poly.
Okay.
Because we're getting away from the crumb.
John. No, I'm just saying, okay, that's good. John?
My question is, where are you now? You haven't prepared your design development, you're beyond that, or where are you?
We just had preliminary design, but we've done a lot of groundwork for that, and we would like to continue with that because I think we would have to repeat the process. To get these guys back into a design mode, we'd have to amend that, but I think we could get that going within a month, 2 months, and then we can have that. If you're looking to get stuff in the ground this year, we can run with this.
And that number includes their design work?
Correct.
Well,
Yeah, my question revolves around the fact that you can take some time to decide on what the bill's going to be. They can keep going with.
Right, the only thing that's going to change would be the infill for the turf. Everything else is the same. All the designs are the same, correct?
Yeah. Rather than hold up that part of the process.
Provided we don't choose an organic material that needs an irrigation system. So once we're sure that's off the table, then we don't have to worry about adding that to a cost.
For the irrigation, again, since we are in New England, we can sometimes cap off an existing system that may have been servicing the field, put in some quick couplers, potentially a water cannon.
Okay.
That's about that can be incorporated.
Both fields have irrigation systems now.
So realistically, if we were to say, yeah, we want to do this, and then we did a bid waiver to allow you to continue, which makes sense because they're so vested into the project. Doesn't make sense to bring in another group, in my opinion. It would be a vote we'd take. Time-wise, I mean, we're talking if you were to get a green light, how much time do you need to come up with your plan? Then we have to go out to bid for fields. That takes time. Kind of give us an idea of what that timeline would look like. I mean, because
I'm going to pass it off to Dave because he has a pretty detailed...
Are we going to jump through hoops to try to not meet a date that we wouldn't meet anyway for this fall?
We have put together a draft schedule of how we move forward from here, and Ed has copies. I think he's going to hand them out.
And thank you all for staying with us. You know, I know this is a long meeting.
Again, for the record, Dave Dixon with Malone McBroom. This schedule goes all the way back to January 2016, where the turf committee voted unanimously to go forward with the shock pad and accepted the proposed improvements as we had shown on the plans that you saw tonight, which were not the only plans that were created, but there were several alternative layouts for consideration, as well as costs. And what you see tonight is what the turf committee approved to move forward with, and they did that to move forward to the Board of Education. First it went to the Operations Committee, which voted unanimously in favor of the project as presented, sent it to the full board, and they voted unanimously in favor of approval and to send the project to the Board of Finance. So tonight we are on March 22nd, so toward the bottom of the first page, Board of Finance meeting. Assuming that the project is approved to move forward, we would begin immediately tomorrow to proceed to final design, land use permitting, bidding, and construction phase services. So if we flip the page, on the reverse side of that same sheet, one of the first things we do within the first week is we're going to meet informally with the town planner, with the city planner, Alan Weiner and Bob. By the first week in April, we will have submitted plans. This is a very accelerated schedule because the amount of time that we have in order to complete design, get the project bid, and get it constructed in order to have them done this year is very compressed. So they would be submitted to the for site plan approval on the 4th. By the 19th, Design Review Committee, which is the group set up by the city consultants, by the city staff, sit down and review the proposed project. Our first planning commission meeting would be April 27th. We had made the assumption, in order to keep this thing on schedule, that we would get an approval in one night. Otherwise, the entire schedule shifts by a month. The next meeting would be May 25th, so we're hopeful that the project would be approved on the 27th. On May 2nd, and this is something that we recommend doing, and we've done this many municipalities, is we actually do a two-bid system. We bid the turf separately from the work. This gives you the best value for the dollar. If time permits, this is the way to go. So right now, we have enough time, assuming that we get approval from the Planning Commission on the 27th, we have enough time to put this thing out for the synthetic turf only. That would be for the turf and the infill. So it would be at that time that we are bidding the turf. So we would be selecting, ultimately selecting a vendor as well as an infill. And because we haven't settled on an infill, if we take the LA approach that Kevin had talked about, we're looking at perhaps 3. In the meantime, while we're going through this process, it gives us an opportunity to try to come back to you with some of the concerns and looking at some of these other alternative infills that we've discussed tonight, and perhaps give you and ourselves a better sense of where they're being used, what the success rate is and what some of the concerns are still with. There seems to be concerns with every one of the different infills. There's no perfect system, there's no perfect pill for what we're seeking, but we're going to try to do the best that we can. So while this bid, what I'm calling bid number 1 for the turf, is out to bid, we'll also put out the second bid for the balance of the work, and that's all the site work. While that's a 3-week bid period, okay? So we will have completed a selection of the vendor for the turf before the second bid is due, so that we can then issue an addendum to the second, under the second bid, to the prospective bidders to say, okay, for the line item under turf, you are to carry $750,000. And the turf is going to be whatever it is. Sport turf, sprint turf, field turf, with whatever infill we select. Ultimately, once the bids are open, then you're looking at basically the entire month of June to make your recommendation, for selection of the preferred contractor to the joint board in order to award the bid. And then there's time spent, obviously, and Roger can tell you that there's a couple of weeks necessary in order to get the documents together and actually award the bid and sign the contract. We have a proposed construction start of July 5th. And depending on the size of the contractor and the capabilities of the contractor, these projects can go simultaneously, or if we end up picking somebody who is certainly qualified but needs a month leeway. So we've talked about looking at this thing, saying one will start on the 5th, and the other one would start a month later. So that's why when you get to the very end, you see the first complete school October 6th, and completion of the second school on October 27th. Now, in the interim, in September and October, during those weeks, you would have to propose scheduling those games away. But it looks like if everything goes the way that we anticipate, you'll be playing your first home game on one of the fields on October 7th, which is a Friday, and October 28th, which is also a Friday. If it turns out that we get a contractor who is large enough and capable enough to do 2 fields simultaneously, then we can assume that both fields would be done at the same time, for October 7th.
But you get 2 separate contractors.
You can do it with 2 separate contractors as well. And that would give you the ability to hopefully get everything done.
If the bids run at 1, or you'll get 1 or 2.
Right.
Like we did with the schools.
Right.
That's pretty aggressive.
Yes, ma'am.
Very aggressive.
Bound to not go right.
You've got a lot of built-in...
Did Dave Mills write that schedule?
No, Dave Mills wanted to start in June.
The planning
We'll get you a
commission...
show.
I lost a few brain cells writing the schedule.
You could get hung up at any point here. The planning commission might be one of the areas where you can get
this project up.
Well, you have football practices up at least Central. They practice up there. You've got your band camps that go on during the summer, right? So I'm not certain that you're not going to have interruptions, because I don't think you can have children and construction workers on the same place at the same time.
No, of course not. I mean, we're not talking. I think the concern that was expressed is this is a very compressed schedule, so you can't count on something not going wrong. Now, how programmatically, I think Chris and the schools would have to, and the Board of Ed would have to weigh in on how you're going to conduct things like band camp and band practices.
I was promised the band would have priority. How firm are these bleacher prices, or are they kind of these? I mean, are they? How firm are you at those prices?
We're pretty confident the 1,500-seat bleacher system that we proposed for Central was just constructed in Springfield on another project, so the price is quite good.
That's reusing, no, you said the new.
That would be using...
I'm talking about relocate and renovate. How confident are we on those prices too? I mean, that's
That's it.
We...
That's you. Relocate, was it Muzzy Field bleachers?
Well, why won't we remove them?
But you have for the...
Right, I know that. Well, no, not the bleachers, you gotta leave bleachers there. You're talking the ones in the back.
You have it as 150,000, Ed.
That's what I want. Where did that price come from of 150,000 to relocate those bleachers and install them?
What was that, Cheryl?
Okay, starting with Bristol Central at the bottom, relocate and renovate the existing Muzzy Field bleachers, 150,000. Is that a firm bid?
No, that's an estimate. We're thinking about, everything stays that's an estimate. We're thinking everything stays the same other than retrofitting the riser.
Tell me.
Yeah, the toe board, the kick plate. So the bleacher itself is not going to be changed other than we're going to add and you have to add some ADA ramping on the sides because right now we don't have the ramping.
And to relocate the same, so these are just ballpark figures. We need firm bids on those.
Yeah, those, I don't foresee that being that much more than that. I really don't.
More than that?
Because you're not building the structure. The structure's already built. You're just adding the extruded aluminum that's going to be retrofitted onto that.
And who would go out and procure that vendor to do that?
There's several that do. I mean, we've used a few, Timmy Gallivan out in Massachusetts, a couple that did
All right,
that.
I would like you to have Roger get bids for that as well.
To retrofit these for ramping and for toe boards, kick
Moving
plates.
them, right.
Okay.
Can I ask it one more question, a design question?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. So up at Central, we're very limited on parking, right? There's one handicap spot outside there. You can't really park anywhere close. So we want to talk about maybe some senior citizens, handicapped people. How are they going to have access to walk to that facility and park and get in there? What about medical equipment that needs to get there? I mean, you're extremely limited on. So are you going to have reconstruction for ADA rules?
We've met ADA. We put in a path that was required by the state of Connecticut to make that area handicap accessible.
It's already there.
It's there.
Other questions? All right. In order to, I guess, our motion is still open, okay, to approve 2.9, whatever that was. Are there any amendments to this before we take a vote? Or do you want to withhold the vote for another month? That's going to put this timeline at risk. I'm just sharing that. So
I personally think that we should go forward with a vote, but we should have some sort of stipulation that we get the MSDS sheets and the cost differences on the other infills.
what I would recommend, if the board is so inclined to move ahead with this project, bear in mind, it's a lot of money, but I agree with John. There comes a point where some investments are important. I struggle with this one, I'll be honest with you, but I would entertain that we do a bid to approve the structure and that we revisit the cost, not with crumb rubber, but that we'll come back with an alternative fill that we make a decision on when you revisit and come back to us, and that we instruct the controller's office to hold an amount in the budget for such alternative fills and for bleachers at the school, at which time we will vote when we have better pricing on those items. If that's, yes?
The school is just Central, not Eastern. Eastern's already has some, so we're putting bleachers at Central, which was 500 and,
Well,
no.
we want a bid to relocate.
Okay, so, but that's at Central, we're not doing bleachers at both schools.
Do we need additional bleachers at
I
Eastern?
think right now, Eastern has, what did you say, 600?
I believe it's
900. I mean, I think that'll get us.
At least through the first year.
Because it started anyway.
Is that a fair, so if somebody would like to make a motion, because I can't?
So I'll make that motion.
Chris wants to say something.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Chris.
Oh, that Chris, okay. Like he's not getting up.
I didn't want to yell from the audience. Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe Mr. Casson could give us some idea of what our attendance would be at Thanksgiving Day games, because I don't think 900 or 1,000 is even sufficient at those schools for Thanksgiving. I'm guessing it's somewhere in the 2,000 to 5,000 range.
Well, then maybe right now, what we need to do is, for next year at least, have the Thanksgiving game still a month until we put this out 2 or 3 years to have enough money to buy all the bleachers. I mean, we all want everything, but I don't think we could spend $5.5 million, $6 million right now.
Okay.
I'd also entertain that you keep the game at
I
Muzzy,
agree with
because
that.
I don't think it's fair for either team to have home field advantage.
Muzzy's
Just
a
saying.
tradition. Muzzy's a tradition. I would agree with that.
Well, if we take the bleachers and put them up at the school campuses, I'm not sure how that all works, so.
You can't move every bleacher out, can you? No, whatever. Okay. Can I have that motion made?
So moved.
Okay, so it's...
Yeah, we need to know, you need to be very clear, because you're on thin ice with...
You didn't get it, Jody?
No.
No, we didn't get
My
it.
motion is to approve a bonding resolution in the amount of X.
Yeah, and I need to be clear on what you said that you want the controller's office to do, because we're not clear. We deal in dollar amounts, so you need to tell us dollar amounts.
The 2940 plus the 225, 300, 150 is 3,625,000.
Can we do a couple motions? Let's do one motion to approve the fields for what are the combined fields without the additional firmware? How much are they?
2.9.
Without the alternative. So without the alternative, just to get this thing, keep it going.
Okay.
How about a motion?
That motion's already on the field.
All right, for
That motion's already here.
Seconded.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
But should we do, is it that big that we should do a roll call vote?
Yeah, it is, because it's
Okay.
going to be bonded.
Roll call vote starting over here.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Chair votes yes.
Okay, now
That's for $2,940,000.
Correct.
Now I'll make a second motion for Malone and McBroom to come back to the Board of Finance with additional information for the additional alternatives and their pricing to be considered by the Board of Finance.
Second.
And not to exceed the amount, what was the two fields combined right now with the most? Was it 500,000?
Yes.
525. 525. Not to exceed the amount of $525,000.
Second.
That doesn't mean you can't come in with a $200,000 number.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion?
What about the bleacher? I'll make that next.
That's another motion.
I'll make that
Okay.
next.
And the form of financing with that is going to be bonding.
Correct.
It's just adding
Well,
to
the
it.
package.
So you'll need another roll call vote when it's bonding.
Yes.
You asked for discussion, can I?
Yes, go ahead, discussion.
So to the gentleman, when you come back with your new numbers, there are a number of selections that we have for the other types of fill, correct? Right, we can go core, we can go husk and all that. Could you be specific in the amount associated with the type of alternate fill that you're proposing? For example, filled turf, pure fill, what would that cost be against some other manufacturer's core?
That's what I heard. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, any other questions, any other discussion? Roll call vote starting.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Chair votes yes.
Now we'll make a third motion. To relocate the bleachers up Muzzy Field, from Muzzy Field to Central High School, and to retrofit At 150,000?
To bring them up to compliance.
To bring them up to compliance, and 150 is good?
I think we'll be.
Not to exceed.
Not to exceed 150,000.
That's fine, bonded, roll call vote.
Discussion first. Any questions? Any discussion? All in favor? Well, starting roll call vote.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
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 Chair votes yes. Any other motions? We're good for now?
Yes, we are.
Everybody has their
Hang on a
assignment?
second, Rob, Joey said
Do
something.
we need a bid waiver to Malone?
Oh, thank you. I make a motion for a bid waiver to Malone and McBroom to continue the work on the synthetic fields.
Sorry.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yes.
Motion, one nay. Motion carries.
Motion to adjourn.
There's any other matters to come before the meeting. Jody's informed me, Mayor, you're looking for, with the chair, a special Board of Finance meeting for March 31st at 5:30. It was for what's going on across the street.
I thought it was for 10K.
Justin said, do you need a special Board of Finance meeting after today?
Oh, yes, we
And then
do.
you guys are meeting the
Yes, we
downtown
do.
committee
Yes,
Thursday, and so this will be...
yes.
All right, so it's just...
We have a workshop that night, right?
Yes.
Yes, it'll be before at 5:30. We'll put out a notice to you tomorrow morning. Special Board of Finance, March 31st, 5:30. And now,
Motion to
adjournment is in
adjourn.
order.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all very much.